It was my first bow season, and I had been practicing my butt off. I could not have been more excited for my first archery season. My dad and I were hunting a farm that we had hunted youth season and seen incredible numbers of deer. I had missed a buck that year with my shotgun, and I was determined to redeem myself. We set out our blind and all of our scent stuff that the guy on TV told me worked, and we saw 2 deer the entire weekend. It was my first exposure to the difference between early season and the rut. Feeling deflated, we drove the truck back to the field to pick up our blind. We looked out the window, and there he was, a young buck, not 70 yards from the truck. We laughed to ourselves that he was taking so long to run off, expecting him to turn tail any moment. But he didn't. Instead, he continued to close the distance. We stopped the truck. "Grab your bow," my dad told me. I didn't really want to shoot the deer, but my heart beat faster at the thought of my first bow kill. I got out of the truck and struggled to knock an arrow. I went to the back of the truck and I drew my bow. I poked around the corner of the taillights and saw that he was still coming closer. I had practiced out to 40 yards and was confident at that distance. I let down. As I watched through the back windows, I called up front, "How far?" 45 was the response. He took 2 more steps and turned away. I pulled the 45-pound draw back 30 inches and settled the pins. I bade to stop the deer, and the rest of the truck helped me out, letting out a unified bah. The buck stopped, and I released the arrow. It seemed to take ages for the 100-grain rage to travel the distance, but when it did arrive, I was rewarded with the sound of my arrow burying itself in the buck's off shoulder. The truck erupted. My hands shot in the air as I celebrated the miracle. We celebrated for a few minutes, still in shock that I even had a shot. We had good blood, and we followed it to the edge of the field. There we found my arrow, more good blood, and I knew it was a good shot. Because of the white bubbles in my arrow, we knew it was a lung hit. We tracked him, and as he tumbled down off the field and into the creek, he painted trees and left a red carpet all the way to the bottom. I knew that I would never shoot another broadhead. That Rage 2 blade left a trail that anyone could have followed. We recovered the deer, and I noted that the only hole in the deer was an entry hole, and all of the blood came out of that one hole. My name is John Lockwood, and this is my co-host, Courtney Miller.
Welcome to the Heartshot Outdoors podcast, the #1 podcast that guarantees to never not help you not kill the biggest buck in the country.
Who wrote that intro?
Not me.
I hope that was funny. Okay, so let's get into our main topic. What broadhead to shoot? Fixed blade or expandable? And this is an age-old topic, something that has been around ever since expandables became a thing. And my question to you, Courtney, is what broadhead do you shoot?
So I shoot the standard Rage 2 blade, which is a mechanical broadhead.
And why do you shoot that broadhead?
Well, I've been archery hunting, at least seriously archery hunting, probably the last 4 years or so. And it's one of those things where, my dad's my mentor, and I think that was just what he bought me when he probably bought my first, broadheads for me and helped me get set up with the bow. And I think he even bought the first bow for me. And so I just used what I've always used, and that's what he got me on. And why change something if it isn't broken, right?
Right. And I shot, for that story, I shot the Rage 40 KE, which is like Rage's youth version. And I think they have a new one out for youth currently.
Probably, yeah.
I shot that then, and now I shoot a Rage hypodermic.
Okay.
But I have shot some fixed blades in there. I think the G5, what's it called? I can't remember.
I think I know what you're talking about.
It's just like a 3-blade fixed blade. So that's what I shoot. Now, the big fear is that expandables won't open when they hit their target. Now, what has been your experience, because you shoot an expandable, what has been your experience shooting expandables at targets?
Yeah, I really don't have any experience with horror stories of expandables not opening. And I honestly, I have lots of friends that hunt, and I've never once heard a story about it. I'm sure if I looked online, I'd find all kinds of stuff. But personally, I've never heard anything about it. And I guess my opinion on it, despite the fact I haven't heard any horror stories, is that if it did happen, it's likely because the blades weren't properly stored. I'm not saying that's the only reason, so nobody get upset on that, but it's usually a matter of taking good care of your equipment. You should be, periodically checking It's a matter of taking good care of it and make sure that if they have clips or O-rings, always check for oxidation, the rust, and make sure that they're seated properly on the blades, etc. And when the season ends, you definitely need to make sure that you remove your broadheads for storage in a dry place. Make sure they're clean, in good condition, and, when you put them away. So as far as I can tell, if you do these things, you hopefully won't have to deal with said situation. But how about you? Have you heard any horror stories?
So my cousins actually shot Rage broadheads for the longest time, and they have switched to Muzzies because they have had multiple experiences with their broadheads not opening. Now, I wasn't there for the situation. I can't really speak to exactly what happened, but it seems like it could be a factor of they kind of have shot some older bows in the past. Maybe the bow wasn't shooting fast enough to open the broad. There wasn't enough kinetic energy. That can
definitely happen. If you're not pulling back enough poundage, then you might want to be using a fixed blade, whether you're a smaller person or a young woman or whatever it might be. So that could definitely be a factor in why they didn't open.
Right, and I think that kind of goes back to when I was for my opening segment. I was shooting a 40 KE, and that's what Rage recommended. They didn't recommend that I shot a 2-blade or whatever else they had out at the time.
Yep.
They recommended that I shot the 40 KE because I was pulling, only like 40 pounds. And I had a little bit of a longer draw length, which helped me out because I get a little bit more kinetic energy out of that. But that was definitely something that that I had to decide for myself. But I have shot fixed blades in the past, and specifically, so the argument for me is that, well, the Rage is great. They open a great big hole. They're fantastic. I've loved how they shoot, but they're expensive.
Yep.
And I can't really afford to pay $50 every time I need a new set of broadheads. Every time I shoot 3 critters.
Yep.
So I shoot fixed blades. I've shot them for doe management. I've shot them for turkeys. Turkeys are the big one for me because a turkey isn't really worth my $50 broadhead.
I might have to look into that.
So I've shot a couple different fixed blades. I think I've shot the Exodus, which is their big advertisement is that they're a little bit shorter, so they fly more like a field point.
Okay.
And then I've shot that. I think it's a Montec by G5.
Yep, I've heard of those.
I think that's what it's called. So those are the 2 fixed blades I've shot. And the problem I've had with those is that they actually don't fly like my field point. And that's kind of the big thing for me is that I want my broadhead to fly exactly like my field point does because I'm not gonna practice all summer with my field point and then move my sight for my broadhead. That just seems
needs to be consistent.
Right. So that's why I shoot a Rage. And also the big old blood trail that follows after it.
Yep.
So the stories about the Expandables not opening, they are there. I have heard them. But I think you have a great point about that probably has a lot to do with just kind of, is your bow fast enough? And are you maintaining your broadheads the way that they need to be maintained? So
I'm even guilty of that, honestly.
Right.
I talked to a buddy that I work with about some of this stuff just so I could get a refresher on it. And he's way more into archery than I am. And I realized that I probably don't take good enough care of my broadheads. I never had my dad yelling at me when I was little about, taking them off and putting them away and storing them like that. So I'm going to definitely make sure that I start doing that. Otherwise, I will be out a lot of money having to buy new ones.
Yeah, I buy new ones. I buy new ones every year.
Yep.
And I think I do that partially because I lose them. Mm-hmm. And the other part is because I want to trust them. Mm-hmm. And that brings up the ethical argument because there's a lot of people that they don't shoot them just because they don't trust them. Like even if they were to be right 90% of the time, even if the broadhead opened 90% of the time, that 10% would still weigh on their conscience because no hunter wants to wound an animal.
Right.
I mean that's
of course not. Yep.
That's something that nobody wants to deal with. And if you're not 100% confident that your broadhead is gonna get the job done, you probably don't want to shoot that.
I think it's a matter of doing research and being competent in what you're doing. And I'm not trying to insult anyone by saying that, if you shot a broadhead and it didn't open. But like I said, I mean, I've never had a bad experience with mine. I grew up on them. I've never even heard a horror story. And that's my personal experience. And I'm not saying, at some point I'm going to shoot a deer and my broadhead's not going to open and I'm going to wound it. But like I said earlier, why change something if it's not broken? Why fix it? I think it's just personal experience. Do your research, and nobody can tell you that it's going to open 90% of the time. Nobody can tell you that. Only you can do your own research and make an assumption. And I wouldn't go to say that people who shoot mechanical blades aren't, like, they're less ethical than people who shoot fixed blades, for sure. Like, I wouldn't say anything like that, and I don't think you would either.
No. I shoot a mechanical.
Exactly. You'd be contradicting yourself. I think you just have to do your own research and put the time in, and be competent, be confident as well in what you're doing.
Definitely.
Otherwise, you shouldn't be, hunting. However you're hunting, with whatever gear you have.
Well, and the other side of that argument is that, a fixed blade opens bigger, and so it kills the animal quicker, and so
that can depend. But
is it more ethical to shoot or I'm sorry, not the fixed blade, but the expandable opens bigger?
Yep, I know what you mean.
So that's my question. Is it more ethical then to shoot?
But that's the thing. What is more ethical? People will say it's the elk hunting out west. Is it rifle or is it archery? And some people are like, oh, rifle hunting, that's kind of like the cheap way out, and you shouldn't shoot more than 500 yards or 1,000 yards. And some people say, like, you need to be this close, and it's a personal thing. But like, I go rifle hunting for elk out west, and some people do archery, and they're like, you can get closer and you have a better chance, and you shouldn't be shooting rifle long range at an elk. It's a personal decision, and you go based off of experience. I learned from my dad and what's worked for him for 30 plus years or whatever it's been, You don't just go and make those decisions. And if you are, then you're probably not doing it right. You need, like we've been talking about in both of our podcasts, you need to make smart decisions, put your research in, ask other people, get their opinions, and then make a decision based on that. That's my opinion on it. There is no, it's more ethical to shoot one over the other because it puts a bigger hole in it. I mean, should we not be archery hunting then? Should we just do shotgun slug hunting in Minnesota because you're more likely to kill it with a slug than you are with an arrow? I think everybody can nitpick at stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's just how it's always going to be.
Yeah. I think you're exactly spot on that it's a personal decision that people just need to decide for themselves. And honestly, it's like no one else is responsible for that decision.
And accidents happen all the time.
Right.
If you're a true hunter and you hunt for a very long period of time, you are at some point going to wound an animal, and you may or may not track it down and be able to finish it. That is a fact of nature. I had my 60-something plus year old boss who's had TV shows in the outdoor industry tell me that himself. If you have not made any kind of a mistake hunting, then you haven't been hunting long enough. And I'm not encouraging it by any means, and we all feel bad when it happens, but it will happen. And what you need to do is learn from it. If you're learning from it, then you are a true ethical hunter. You feel remorse and whatnot, and you try to be better. I think that's what matters.
So this fall, actually, and this is kind of a story that even just makes me cringe telling it, but anybody that follows my stuff on social media, so I killed a doe this fall, and I got it all on video, but I never released the video because I put such a horrible shot on that deer. And it was a hanging hunt. It was kind of getting the last light, and this doe was coming basically straight in under my stand.
Okay.
And I hadn't had a chance to cut shooting lanes, and that's not, that's a whole nother discussion is how to cut shooting lanes. But I hadn't cut shooting lanes, and so I was kind of at the mercy of whatever brush was around. And this doe came walking in basically head on directly under my stand. And I drew my bow, and again, hunting with a camera in the stand is like, it's just a completely different animal. And so
that's a whole other discussion too.
Right. So I'm just trying to get the camera ready, and I get my bow drawn, and she's coming right in, and I'm confident that I can make a shot kind of straight down on her. And I've always thought that people that miss those 5-yard chip shots are Sallies. But then I draw back, and she's right under me, and I know I have to make the shot quick, and I didn't want to stop her, and so I did everything wrong. and just, instead of doing some things right, I just did everything wrong.
Yep.
And kind of came to full draw and just kind of punched the trigger really without aiming. And I just hit her way back on, like, I shot over her spine and into her hip. And it was just a horrible, horrible shot placement. I felt awful about it. And I tell you what, like, anyone that's had to go home after a horrible shot without their deer in the back of the truck and say, I'm going to wait till tomorrow to look for it. I mean, that
feeling cannot even be expressed. No hunter wants to experience it, but at some point we all probably will, one way or another. And the remorse that you feel and the disappointment in yourself, I don't know. I guess that's what makes you a true hunter, though. Right.
So the moral of the story actually is when I came back the next morning, I had a massive blood trail to follow. And honestly, I followed a red carpet 60 yards from where I saw her leave the field, and she was dead in the creek.
I bet that made you feel a lot better.
And, even though I broke my rage, which I had never broken one before, but I busted that thing to smithereens. And that rage saved me, because I would not want to say that any other broadhead could have done what that rage did for me, because it opened a massive hole and it bled her out. Even though I had a bad shot, it did its job.
And you were using fixed or mechanical on that one?
That's my rage. So it was a mechanical.
That was your mechanical. Okay, yeah. Yep. Oh yeah, rage. Okay.
And so that was just it was both for me. It was a bad experience and a good experience.
And a good experience. Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the flight issues that fixed blades present. And I actually did my own test on this. So I had some Exodus broadheads, and I had those Montex, and then I had like another knockoff 3-blade fixed blade.
All right.
And it might have been like Stingers or something, but and then I had my Rage, and I took it out in my backyard, and I had always heard people say that fixed blades don't fly the same as a field point, but I had always kind of thought that was baloney, because they're designed to fly like a field point, right?
Yep. Believe everything you hear, right?
Right. So I went out and tested it for myself, and I could not believe that at 20 yards, my arrow was moving 2 inches. I was astounded, and I was shooting at that point. I was shooting every day at 60 yards, and it's like 2 inches at 60. It's like that's a big difference. And at that point, I decided, under no circumstance am I going to shoot a fixed blade more than 20 yards, because I knew that I couldn't trust it. There was just no way that I could trust, the arrow drifting that far. And so that is honestly one of the biggest reasons that I shoot an expandable, because
me too,
because it flies just like my field point. And I practice all summer. Right. I know exactly what to expect. And that's another big tip that I would give you guys out there, is that shoot your broadheads at a target. Like don't just shoot your field points all summer and then come fall screw your broadhead in and say, yeah, it'll fly. Just like it won't. It probably won't. And so even if it's an expandable, like even my Rages, I notice the slightest drop. They just drop just a little bit more than my field points at distance. So that's what I would recommend to you guys. Shoot your broadheads at a target, and buy a target that you can shoot your broadheads at. Don't shoot them at those bag targets. You'll spend.
Don't do that.
You'll have to cut them out. That's no fun.
Yeah. So a couple other things with flight issues that I can think of that you should keep in mind. Number one, fixed blade broadheads are harder to tune in general. So the blades on the front kind of act like another set of fletchings on the front of the shaft.
Right.
So this causes wind drift issues, etc. And then number two, today's bows are made extremely fast. Everyone has been competing with each other, who can make the fastest. And
what's the fastest out now? Like 380, I feel like.
I think maybe around there. I don't even know. Like I've seen some crazy bows. But people try to utilize everything that their bow has to offer, especially in these brand new, just crazy bows. So instead of sticking to an appropriate speed range, which I would say is probably under 300 feet per second, a lot of people try to shoot fixed blades at too high of a speed, which would be over that 300 feet per second. So a fixed blade broadhead gets really radical at that speed, or, it can. Mechanical broadheads are typically more forgiving if you mess up form-wise as well. But remember, you still have to tune and practice with mechanicals to make sure that you're still on target. That's kind of what I'd say. But it comes down to application, typically. Who's shooting? Is it someone new to archery who doesn't shoot a higher poundage? Or maybe they have a really short draw length? Then you might not have them shooting a giant expandable broadhead. They'd likely shoot a cut-on contact fixed blade broadhead.
Right.
So your broadhead choice depends on the animal you're hunting as well, and just who's shooting in general. There's a lot of factors that go into this decision of which one should you shoot and when.
So you shoot a Rage 2 blade.
Yep.
So do you reuse your broadheads, or do you buy new ones after the season?
So in my opinion, this can be a tough one. Broadheads, like you said, are incredibly expensive. For example, though, if I were to hit a shoulder bone or something hard on a pass through, and if the way that I've learned it is that if the ferrule of the broadhead is bent, that's the center part, it's absolutely critical that you test the straightness of it to make sure it's straight. And I didn't even know some of this stuff in detail until I talked to a friend who shoots competitively. But you can do this by threading the broadhead into the arrow shaft and spinning it on an arrow spinner. And according to my friend who's very experienced in this, if you aren't willing to do this, then our recommendation would be to throw it out and buy a new product.
No, I've broken. Actually, most of the time when I shoot a deer, my Rage comes out pretty clean.
Okay. Yep.
And I know I've bent them before. That's kind of a big thing. They're kind of flimsy blades.
Got to replace the blades. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, you can buy blade replacements.
But that's the tricky part, is do you do the whole thing, or do you just do the blades? And like I said, it kind of just depends on if you're willing to test everything out or not. That would play a part in being ethical, I think, as well, making sure that it's all put together and in good condition. And if not, then buy a new product.
Yep.
Replace it. I
could not agree more. So let's really quickly talk about what do you shoot at turkeys? So
I actually use the same Rage 2 blade. And I know people have different preferences. They have special blades out there for turkeys, as they say.
Those big Magnus bullheads that supposedly take the head off.
The guillotines and stuff. Yeah. And like you said, they're expensive. And so honestly, I just started turkey hunting with a bow last year, and I used the Rage 2 blade again like I do for deer season, which, like you said, maybe that's not worth it in case you ruin it, and you ruin it on a turkey, but I love turkey hunting, so I might look into a fixed blade, like you said, for turkey hunting and kind of do my research on that as well. But yeah, that's what I use. How about you?
I actually shoot a fixed blade, and I know we talked a little bit about this, and for me, it's primarily just the cost. It's I don't want to... Okay.
Spend that much money on turkeys?
We don't have
chicken?
We don't have a ton of time left, but quick story. So last year I was turkey hunting, and I had a turkey come in to my decoys, and this bird comes in, and I could have swore I had a broadhead on this on this arrow, but Okay, so I shot the turkey and feathers and everything. I'm like, yes, shot the turkey.
Ooh.
Do the whole celebration dance to the camera, and go to recover it. Can't find the arrow, and there's no blood.
Oh shoot!
And I'm like, what? What happened? I thought I had shot this turkey.
Stupid thunder chickens.
And I brought a buddy out to help me find it. He found the arrow. There was not a drop of blood on it, and there was no broadhead on it. I was like,
now you're really confused.
What happened? Like, how on earth?
So did you just shoot it and you had forgotten to put a broadhead on it?
That's what
I'm assuming.
That's what they thought, but like,
you don't know.
The
turkey just ran off and was fine, huh?
I was so certain that I had a broad. I should look through my video and see if I had any video.
Had it when you shot
of the broadhead
maybe, yeah.
on the.
That turkey was probably more confused than you.
That turkey was very lucky is what that turkey was. Okay, so let's get down to it. Ultimately, Courtney, what would you recommend our listeners shoot?
Okay, so which works better, fixed or mechanical? My opinion is that shot placement is what kills animals. Expandables are
right.
more accurate, from my experience, especially for long range shooting and depending on weather conditions. You know, the average person that shoots up to 30 yards isn't going to notice much of a difference in accuracy. It's the further out distances that can matter, you know, with the wind factors and the weather, and so much stuff plays a role into it. And like I said, depends on what poundage you're pulling back. How big are you? What's your draw length? Are you new to turkey hunting? All that stuff. So I don't think that there is a right answer of fixed blade versus mechanical. I think it depends on the person, like a lot of other things in hunting. It just depends on what you're comfortable with, and, you know, get recommendations from friends who shoot and friends who hunt and go from there.
So I 100% agree with you. I think that if you are going to, I think personally, if it is most ethical to shoot the biggest broadhead you can accurately. So if you can shoot a Rage 2-blade accurately, that is amazing. If you can, I haven't shot those Rage Extremes. Those things are like 2.5-inch cutting diameters. Those are incredible. If you can shoot a 3-blade expandable accurately, shoot that. Whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever you shoot best, and whatever is going to kill your animal quickest, I think that is, and most ethically, I think that is what you should shoot. And I can't answer that question for our viewers. I can only answer it for myself, and for me, that is a Rage hypodermic. That it flies the best. It leaves a great blood trail. It cuts, you know, as much as one could ask a broadhead too. So that is what I would recommend. So anything else to add? I think we're just about out of time.
Nope, I think I'm good. There's a lot that plays into this, so just do your research and go from there.
Right. Yep. So that is it for our second podcast. Super excited that we got 2 down, and excited to bring you guys even more. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you next week.